Salon. I'm Adam Smith, and I'm delighted to be your host in the salon today. And today's topic is one that every researcher can relate to, which is when research goes wrong, can you adapt? And Raysa and Subhashisa, you can please do turn your cameras on now. We were having last-minute technical difficulties, but we were in a little bit of a panic, so apologies for being 1 or 2 minutes late. So yes, I'm Adam Smith. I'll be your host today. And well, we all know that research doesn't always go according to plan. Experiments can fail, results can be unexpected, and sometimes the challenges we face can be almost as complex as the science that we're trying to work on. These setbacks can be challenging and can even shake our confidence. However, if we could view these moments not just as obstacles, but as opportunities to learn, adapt, and innovate, maybe things would be better. Today, we're exploring how we can shift our mindset to embrace these challenges and how resilience and adaptability can drive scientific progress, even when things don't go as expected. We're fortunate to have with us, as ever in the salon, two brilliant speakers who've navigated their own ups and downs in their careers. We have Dr. Raysa Zein, and I think I got that right that time, who is a nutrition and dementia researcher at Westminster University. And joining her is Subhashisa Swain, a physiotherapist and epidemiologist who's worked across the globe focusing on multimorbidity and exercise medicine, but is now at the University of Oxford. And is also a DEMCOM fellow, something that I know some of you have been familiar with because we've talked about that on our podcast and in our blogs and things in the past. Did I get that right for both of you? Hopefully I did.
Yeah.
Mostly. Well, as I mentioned, both of our talks, as I mentioned, we have both of our talks let me get this right. Well, as I mentioned, we have both our talks, and then afterwards we have conversation. We'll have some Q&A and some chat with you. So I'll be asking our speakers a few questions to delve into this topic, and then we'll move over into the chat to give you an opportunity to ask some questions of our brilliant speakers, but also to share your own experiences and your own tips for how you overcome these difficulties when science goes wrong. But without further ado, Raysa has very kindly agreed to go first, and I think I'm gonna share slides on your behalf.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and turn my camera and microphone off, and I'll share slides for you now.
Thank you so much. So yes, failure in research is big. I personally don't believe there's anything called failure in research because it's just redirection. The point of research is to find out about new things, learn about new things, change the way we do things. And I think when things go wrong is the time when you learn how to get things right. And that's a great opportunity to change how we do things, because as researchers, we're used to using a specific protocol or a specific formula or a method. This is how it should work, so it should work perfectly this way. But when things fail and fall apart, and it's not a matter of when, to be honest, personally, with my experience, I tend to work a lot with people in the field doing clinical trials, especially dementia patients. It's not a matter of when things go wrong. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Because every single time, things will not work as you planned. Whether it's time, whether it's recruitment, whether it's the data analysis, things always go wrong. And how we adapt to that is how we learn and how we progress and develop as researchers, and it's how research develops. Way too many innovations in research in the entire world came from mistakes. So this first slide that Adam is showing is a huge example of when research went wrong in my trial. I started out with everything sorted. I had a very clearly defined protocol. My participant group, I knew what I was doing. I've contacted the trusts around me, the NHS. They've all assured me they had 1,100 people registered who had an MCI diagnosis, which was amazing because that was my target population. I went ahead, got my ethics sorted, which wasn't the most fun part of doing NHS ethics. When everything was sorted, planned, ready to go, I went to the R&D office within the trust, sat down, looking at the register for people, only to find out that they've mixed the codes between mild cognitive impairment and mild Alzheimer's, which are not the same thing. And what I actually had was 5 potential participants, 3 of which did not meet my criteria. So I ended up with 2 participants when I've already wasted a year and a half with ethics, getting everything set up, and then reached out to other trusts and everything and realized that actually MCI diagnosis was more complicated than I expected, or even anybody within the research team knew, because there's many issues regarding MCI diagnosis, being underdiagnosed. Instead, I remember having a couple of days where I sat down, I was like, this is a failure, there's nothing I could do about it. But actually what happened is I decided to change how I was doing things. And I switched, as you can see from the flyer here, to kind of a similar protocol, but changed my population. So instead of looking for people who were already diagnosed with MCI, I started screening and diagnosing, not diagnosing properly, referring them to the memory clinics, but then we started screening for the research study. That helped the community more because more and more people actually ended up getting the help and support they need. But I got my participants in the end, and I actually had a wider participant group, and that worked really amazing because out of that came more research into MCI diagnosis in the communities and why it's underdiagnosed and how do we improve that. So that failure, you can call it, because that's what it felt like in the beginning, actually led me to work a lot more with different trusts, different memory assessment clinics, and what we can do to improve MCI diagnosis and how to change how things are happening. So that was one of the biggest learning opportunities. I remember sitting there being like, this is a failure, what can I do? And then I started looking into the research. I'm like, the mechanism works the same way. Why am I targeting this and not that? And actually things worked a lot better. My recruitment was a lot faster. Things moved a lot faster. And I think the outcome of the study really depended a lot more on getting this participant group that was, as you usually call it, worried well, than the participant group who was already diagnosed with MCI. Because MCI is that stage where people have some issues, but it's not as seen by their family members, by people around them, so they rarely get diagnosed. And it was a very big learning opportunity. Adam, can we go to the next slide as well? Thank you. And this is another also example that I did a trial with dementia patients during COVID, which was never a positive experience. And with COVID happening, they were asked to shelter. What happened, shielding, all of that. I once again thought the study is done. It was a 6-month trial. I needed to continuously be able to access the people, and that wasn't gonna work. I didn't have the funding because, as we all know, funding likes to come in 3-year, 4-year timeframes. They do not cater for life happens. A global pandemic was not in my protocol or anything expected to happen. But instead, that picture of me smiling, I was feeling anything but happy at that moment. That was the lab equipment put in my carry-on and in my yoga bag. And I started taking it to participants' gardens to do my data collection in some of the most bizarre environments. And that helped me also learn and adapt my skills with like the cognitive measures we're using, anthropometric measures, what participants are comfortable with and what they're not. Another picture you have here is of the keyboard and my laptop with one participant holding up one of the cognitive measures I was doing. And that helped actually, that kind of research and work helped in the validation of the virtual use of these cognitive measures that have not been ever done virtually, but we had to do it during COVID because studies had to continue. And I became part of a research group that's looking into the validation of the virtual use of these measures, which was something we've never thought of before. And that was another opportunity that just came out of things happening, failing at that moment where things just went wrong. You couldn't change what you were doing in a way, but the protocol could be adapted. And the beloved P 0.05. Everybody knows it, everybody loves it. Every single analysis I did, and it went to bit above, and I would sit there and be like, oh my God, this is the end of it. I've achieved nothing. That was a waste of time. That was a waste of money. But in the end, it's part of the learning process. It's part of saying, okay, this doesn't work, but this might. Adam, the next slide. So what I found out is that I did not fail, actually, and the study did end up going really well. And there was a lot of learning outcomes from that, and a lot of things that will go into bigger studies that will be done with maybe more flexible protocols because of that, because of learning how things can actually work without needing to work the way we thought they had. It being able to do virtual testing means I have a wider participation group. It makes things easier. It makes it more accessible as well for people with dementia to come in and do the research. Having different participant groups as well. It taught me how to work in the weirdest environments and that things can be done still to a level that we expect. Maybe it's not this amazing quiet area you're working in your lab, but at the end of the day, research can be done wherever, however, and it's never failure. Just learn how to hold on to these opportunities and get something new out of them. There's always a way to get something out of this. And my funding got extended by getting involved in projects from the things I learned, to be honest. And that's how the study managed to finish and get the results we were looking for by being involved in different other aspects of these studies. Thank you. That was all from me, and then let you speak.
Thank you very much. That was brilliant. And I think I loved some of your points that you pick up, because I think you've picked up on there two of the most common, well, certainly one of the most common one, particularly in qualitative research, that goes wrong, which is study recruitment. I think study recruitment is the bane of all qualitative researchers' life, isn't it? I think people are either over ambitious perhaps, or think it's always, I feel, much harder than you think it's going to be. And then you were doing your research during COVID as well, which I think taught us so much about how to adapt, particularly again with qualitative research. I suppose if you were working in a lab, a lot of people suddenly buried themselves in their data that they'd already collected and went home and got to working coding and doing further analysis and looking at their fields. And I think in qualitative research, you did a brilliant job of adapting to say, hey, how can we either look at this, this is a unique, thinking of that as a unique opportunity to look at your research under that kind of lens of what it's like during a pandemic. Are there any particular lessons you think you learned during COVID? How did you adapt?
By being flexible, by trying to work with whatever I was given. Some tests, yes, I couldn't do. I couldn't do some ketone testing I wanted. I couldn't do the genetic screening I wanted because it was saliva samples. And the lab destroyed my samples because it was high risk at that time. Yes, that was my face exactly, Adam, at that moment. Because I've spent so much time trying to get the ethics, because genetic testing is not easily approved by the NHS. And I'm still heartbroken to this day about it. But I learned instead I did a questionnaire and looked into how much people are flexible and happy to get genetically tested for the ApoE4, which has been linked to Alzheimer's disease. Because I found out that there's no studies looking into how acceptable it is for people from their point of view. So we did a study on that, looking at how they perceive the test and the results, and how likely are they to get the test done if they want to. So rather than screening, we still got some research out of it, maybe not what I was looking for, but different things. But I adapted the study. I taught my participants to do some of the tests I needed to do. So some of the ketone tests, the finger prick, some of them have never done it before. I sat down 2 meters away from them with my mask on, and I was teaching them how to use it step by step. I taught them how to use Teams and Zoom to be able to have video calls with me, because you're talking about 80, 85-year-olds with cognitive impairment. It's not your normal everyday individual who knows how to use technology. And to be honest, I think the outcomes were much better because of that, because it built a relationship between me and the participants, because I was there every step of the way, and it did help. So adapting during COVID, adapting with recruitment, I need to flag up Join Dementia Research. That saved my study. Hands down, honestly.
I'm glad you should say that. I presented data, I think, at the ADI afterwards, because I did a big piece of analysis after or towards the kind of latter stages of the pandemic to look at how Join Dementia Research how it had changed during the pandemic. And actually, during the pandemic, it recruited more people into studies than ever before, because it was the only way to recruit.
Yes.
People couldn't go to memory clinics anymore. The only place was registers, which kind of brought home, I think, that as a future resilience measure, thinking in advance now as part of our kind of, future planning. Should that happen again, how can you continue to recruit? And I think registers play a great role in that.
Yeah.
It was mostly as well survey work. It was kind of, non-interventional distance asking
Mine was interventional. It was a 6 months intervention. I was collecting lots of data, qual and quant. And I managed to recruit all the participants I wanted through Join Dementia Research, to be honest with you, during the pandemic.
So for if anybody doesn't already know this, in the UK, there's a service called joindementiaresearch.nihr.ac.uk, which will support any ethically approved study. It doesn't matter how it's funded, as long as it's got ethics and you're looking for people with dementia, it'll support you to recruit. We actually have a live stream recording. If you visit the community and go down to career events and then click the link to look at past events, there's a session, or actually it might be under research. Sorry, I'm giving you bad information. If you go to research posters or live poster sessions and then go to past sessions, there is something in there called Study Recruitment Support Live with Join Dementia Research. And we had a brilliant talk from Charlotte Jones, who talked through how you can get support from that service. Of course, it's going research that involves people. Can I just ask you, coming back, kind of mentally, how you deal with that? Because you've got all your plans laid out. I know maybe it's my mild ADHD, but I don't cope with change quite well. It definitely takes me a while to kind of come to terms with it. Are you the kind of person that quickly looks for solutions, or what advice would you have for people?
It wasn't quickly. I'm just like you, especially when you have a clearly set plan and what comes to research, and every single step is approved. So that's the thing with research. A lot of times, even if you're personally somebody who can adapt, research is not easy to change things. But I had to sit down and be like, it's either I throw this 2 years work into the bin, which I wasn't going to do because I'm not the person to give up. And I don't think a lot of researchers are those kind of people, because you don't go into research if you're somebody who easily gives up, because honestly, research would push you out the door from day one. It's about change and accepting it. It takes time. I'm not saying that worked within one day, but it's reflecting on that and knowing that there are other opportunities. And I started changing things slowly and taking it every day by day. Like whatever we needed to work with, I was working with. And to be honest, more and more opportunities started coming up with people reaching out saying, I've seen this. Have you thought of that? And that made me change a lot more of the things I was doing as well. And it created a community of researchers who are adapting and changing. And that's the most important thing. As a researcher, you need to be resilient. You need to be able to say, I believe in what I'm doing. I believe it's important. And I'll find whatever way possible to achieve that. As I said, maybe working in the lab, it's a bit different, which I'm sure he's going to talk a bit more about. But when you're working with people, you need to demonstrate that you're confident in what you're doing. You cannot be hesitant, because the moment you hesitate, you lose them. They're trusting you with a lot when they're taking part in your research. You cannot hesitate. And it's that confidence of, okay, I think I know what I'm doing. Let's see what we can do.
Project that confidence as well.
Yeah.
I've got a lot more questions, but let's go off to
Yes.
Subhashisa now, who's gonna you're gonna do your 10 minutes now. Do you want to? We didn't have a chance before we started for a screen share test, so let's see how this works. Do you want to try and share your screen now?
So maybe you can share the same slide. So
have you emailed me your slides as well?
It's the same one. It's just one.
Oh, well, they're on the same. I apologize. Sorry, I didn't realize that. Well, so did you? So you both got together in advance, did you? I didn't know you'd secretly collaborated. This is the thing. I think for future salon presenters, my instructions are very vague. It's turn up, do your 10 minutes. We'll see you soon. Right, hold on. Let me browse. Oh, there we go. You're right. They're there. Okay. Right. I'll share my screen for you now. You can just tell me when you want me to progress them.
Oh, no. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Adam, for this podcast. And me and Raysa have met before, kind of planning out what to talk. I had quite different research journey. And after hearing what Raysa mentioned, that is really a challenge. And I can see that how difficult it is when it involves patient recruitment in research. So I am a quantitative researcher. I work with the data. First initial 5 years of my career, I was working in the field as a field epidemiologist. Then I moved into desktop, doing data like big data, epidemiology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, that kind of stuff. So I had different challenges. So first thing, I would like to say that when you say that, oh, there is something wrong, that something word is more important than believing that everything went wrong. So that is most important thing we need to understand. Yes, there is wrong, but there is something wrong. Not everything is wrong. Next, please. So this is the picture of my desk. I was doing my research. This is during COVID, and so I came to UK to do my PhD, and I chose to do PhD in a large electronic health record. And it had nearly 20 million patient records for 20 years' time. And that was my first exposure to work on such a huge data. And I proposed, my research proposal was approved by the supervision team, and we got approval for the data access and everything. I proposed to use some sort of complex models for kind of machine learning approach in my research. And after first year of my PhD, COVID happened. And until then, there was a lot of logistic issue accessing the computer, desktop data. It took a while to sort it out, which was not that difficult. But the real difficulty started with my modeling, because I did not have any in-house experience within the team or inside the department. And I was getting support from a postdoc based at the University of Oxford. And we were just communicating over email. And COVID was not the right time, kind of entertaining someone with questions always. So I went, the kind of model I was trying to run, I realized my data is not appropriate for that kind of model, which is already available, like the resources. Because I am using healthcare data, and most of the data have been used in this model are like machine learning simulated data, and they have different structures and different features. I am not a computer scientist. I am an epidemiologist with health science background, and I was interested in learning things. I spent 3 months just to figure out what to do. And just to give a hint, each of the model was running for 3 to 5 days, just for one model, and I had similar 10 to 15 models to run. And after I spent quite 3 months time, I wrote the code, it was running, and I was happy. Oh, finally, I wrote the code, and it is running in R. Good. But after 5 days, I saw it did not work properly. There's some error message. I saw the red letters. And I was like, honestly, I was feeling like hopeless what to do now. Because this is what I want to do. And this is very important in my PhD. And this is like the backbone of my PhD chapter. Very innovative thing I want to do. I was seeking for help for quite a long time. So then, yes, it was not very pleasant experience then. And in COVID, you just talk to people virtually, but it was very difficult to get help, especially when there is no resource available in this kind of field. So what I did, I went back to my supervisors and I said, this is what I want to do. This is what I have been trying for 3 to 4 months. It is not working. The results what I'm getting is not making any sense because the models are not prepared for this. And I am not a computer scientist who can write a model from scratch, but I need help. So we discussed about it, then we found a solution, then we slightly changed our approach, slightly changed our objective and what we're trying to find. And yeah, after 6 months, it worked. Fantastic results. I got some clustering results. I got some results on multimorbidity, which I wanted. To be honest, it was not very good experience. And both the timing aligned together. COVID and the codes are not working. It aligned together and made it more complex. Next slide, please. So first thing I did, what I remember my response was, I shut down everything. I shut down my computer. I shut down everything. I just went for a walk. And that was my response immediately. Not thinking what happened. Just like, this is not working. That's it. And I took a break for 3 days. I did not look at my computer. I did not look at my codes. I did not start digging where is the fault. Just ignore it. Try to forget what happened. Then, after 3 days, I used some strategies or techniques. I think I have summarized it in my next slide, please. Um, Next slide, please, Adam. Yes. So this is the technique I kind of summarized if I look back, and this is the approach I followed. First, I had to establish that there is really something wrong. Whether it is in my data, in my code, in my research question, or the way I'm doing it, there is something wrong. Next, what I did, I reached out to the team, my supervision team, my friends, even the people I knew in computer science field. I reached out to them. Do you do this similar kind of work? What do you do? And I accepted this model is not going to work for my kind of data. And this took me quite a time to accept. Maybe this is not the PhD I should do, or maybe I need to change my objective to do something. Then, yes, I reflected what happened, what kind of thing I can learn. I cannot go back and learn all this coding in Python or in R or maybe some computer language to write the code from the scratch. I do not have time for that. So what I did was like I inquired what went wrong and why. So where is the mistake? And finally we found out the way the data is structured, the model is not able to handle that. And there are certain limitations in the model. And I accepted that. Then I went to a friend who is a computer scientist. I worked with them and we tweaked the model and we ran it. So that was the response. I had to find alternative result, be more creative, And I was being very honest to myself, this is not working. So how did I adapt? Next slide, please. So this is the kind of solution, I call it adapt. We need to access when things went wrong. And it varies from each person, each from individual to individual. As Adam mentioned, it also depends on the personality, how you're going to perceive it, how you're going to take it. Because are you in the first year of your research or in second year of your research? Are you a PhD or a postdoc? It depends on so many factors and your personality and the team and the resource. How much money do you have to do next field work? Do you have enough funding? And whether that wrong thing happened, how useful it is for your research. Second thing I did was deviate. Please be flexible to deviate. If things do not go according to plan, deviation is not wrong. Everyone in this field of research, they understand that it is not easy to do, and there are chances things might be different. We adjust with our expectations, with our results, and we be honest that yes, this happened. Can we plan in the future how I am going to present this change happened or this whatever wrong thing happened? So what I did in my thesis, I wrote at the beginning of the chapter, I described the whole experience. This is what I wanted to do. This is the difficulty I faced. This is how I did everything I managed and tackled. I wrote the story at the beginning, and my supervisors, when they were reading it, they're like, "This is very unique way of writing thesis." I'm like, let them know that this is how we learn how to adapt. And yes, please be honest. If you're doing research in someone else's project or in a funded project, let the funding agency know as soon as possible that something happened. We might need more time to extend. We might need more time to more funding or something. So we need to have that plan. And as Raysa mentioned, believe in yourself, confidence, and trust. And that is more important. It's like because we need to trust ourselves, our research, our work, and also the adaptation we are going to follow. So I think also we need to trust the people surrounded by us, like our team, colleagues, patients, everyone. We need to trust them. Things will get better. Next slide, please. So I would like to finish by saying that never give up. Yes, no researcher, they do not want to give up. It might be a little bit of discouraging, but that is not the end of the world. There are ways, and definitely you will figure it out. It might take one day for someone, it might take 10 days for another person, but be flexible to adapt. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I didn't, you know what, I didn't even think in advance of this webinar. I forgot about the pandemic. and I shouldn't have done. Of course, it's not that long ago, but of course, that's this kind of ultimate example of when everybody had to adapt so well, and so why we're all so experienced at this now. I'm going to now try and stick to my questions because I did think about these in advance, and I know that if I go off piece, we're going to be talking all day on various topics. What role does collaboration and seeking advice from others play in this, do you think? Because I think I find it a lot easier when I come across that problem. That's where taking time to have conversations with colleagues that aren't as close to a problem as you are, they can come up with solutions which you might be dismissive of, and they might not understand the problem well. But I don't know. Do you find that helpful, Subhashisa?
Yes, I think absolutely I agree with that.
I mean, because you went and sought help, didn't you, as well?
Yeah, so talking to people, even if they're not in your field, is helpful as well. So the more you explain your problem to people, It gives you clarity inside your brain, and sometimes your answer remains in your explanation. So yes, I would say I would encourage talk to people may be relevant to your topic, your problem, or may not be relevant to your problem as well. Be open to receive help from anyone. If you're open, you can get help.
Was that the same for you, Raysa?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, I think getting advice from people, and as like, it's not just people within your team. Sometimes it's good to have an outsider's perspective. Sometimes you have supervisors, you have people within the lab, within the department, or random people who you're looking at their research. I've approached many researchers who've helped, and I've had people approach. And I think allowing those conversations to happen shows you that you're not alone in that as well.
Absolutely. And I think at the time, during the pandemic, I guess social media was massively playing a part in being able to, and YouTube, I should add, and YouTube and quizzes for some reason. But I think obviously now we know people are turning away from social media in some ways for various reasons, and that's where hopefully our community space is here. We've kind of got all these different chat groups, which aren't being massively used at the moment. But I think if your setback is something career related and you're doing your PhD and you're thinking about doing your Viva right now, or you've just had a bad feedback from somebody, or your studies going wrong, I think we've got those career chat spaces and those research discussion spaces. And I would encourage anybody to make use of those. I think there's not a lot of chat going on there. Don't be afraid, though, to be the first to post if you've got a problem or a question, or you've come up against a barrier, because we've got over 500 members now, and they're there to help. And that's where that kind of snap answers section of the community is for. That if you just need a quick opinion from somebody, please do post in that. I see a few people posting comments about their experience of trying to learn coding at that time. Coding is a great example. I know GitHub and other places have been brilliant at that, and now, of course, AI tools to support that as well. But do post those questions in there. Both of you work in areas that require quite extensive data collection. How do you manage when you encounter issues like missing or unreliable data? And what advice would you give for others? Maybe, Subhashisa, maybe you can take that one first.
Yeah, this is very common. The kind of data I use is very common. So I use the routinely collected data from the primary care setups in the UK, and a lot of data are missing. So, for example, I can say like nearly 40% of the people, they do not have information about smoking or alcohol in the record. So, fortunately, there has been a lot of research going on towards missingness of the data in these kind of electronic health records. And methodologically, a lot of people are working towards it. And statistically and quantitatively, there are different approaches how to deal with missingness of the data. Because again, there are certain rules we follow, whether we want to impute the missing data or something is missing, or we do not want to impute. It depends on the research question. But I can largely say that there are a lot of resources available now, specifically like 10 years back, it was not there. Now, a lot of research has been done on this area, methodologically looking at how to encounter missingness in the data. But I think this is totally different from what someone collects the data from the field. But
It is.
yeah, just to finish that, be honest. If there is a lot of missing data, uh, we just say that this was missing data, and this is how we deal with that.
I think that's it, isn't it? I mean, you just be transparent about it. I don't think anybody, and again, that's another lesson from the pandemic, where if you'd already got a lot of data, or you couldn't continue the intervention because it had to stop 6 months early, you weren't going to disregard that. You had to make use of what you've got, and I think that particularly informed a lot of new thinking about methodology and data, didn't it, Raysa? I don't know if you encountered that.
Yeah, I agree. And as you said, like I'm personally always collecting my data from the field. And a lot of times you have missing data. That genetic screening was my missing data. I had a lot of ketone tests that were missing because some participants refused to do it because they are afraid of blood. They cannot do it themselves, and that's something common. But what helped me is you be honest, you reflect on it. It said so in my paper, it said so in my thesis that this happened. I have this data that I planned to collect and I couldn't. So I used data from the literature to kind of support what I was saying by saying I couldn't do this, but other people who have demonstrated that. And future studies, I will include this, or I will continue a study that will collect this data and try to integrate it into that project, because this is something we can do. We build research built on other research. You're never doing one study on your own in a way. There's always literature to support, and there's literature that comes from your research that will support future research. So that's just opening the door for yourself or for others to collect that data and include it. And as you said as well, there's a lot of statistical analysis methods to kind of acknowledge missing data, but still analyze what you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a shame. One of the ideas that we had for quite some time was this kind of idea of a disregarded data portal. So particularly if it involved animal models as well, where, literally, there's been this ethical conundrum. You've taken, the lives of animals into account, that that data should be kept and put to use. And I think if you're finding yourself with data that you're not going to use, do try and find a repository for that, or come and talk to us, because I think the hesitancy of that is that I think people are always worried that somebody will find something in there that you didn't see and you'll be scooped. But I think the idea of making sure all your data is freely available once the study's concluded, rather than disregarding it, particularly if it didn't go into a publication, is important. Which actually takes me really nicely to a next question, which is failures can be hard to discuss, especially publicly. What do you think the research community as a whole can do to create a more supportive environment where setbacks are seen as part of the learning process rather than something to be hidden? I don't know if either of you have a strong view on that.
I think we need more honesty in the research environment. I think if we see a lot more of, I personally can see a lot of early career researchers talking about their setbacks, but if we can see more professors, more people who've made it, Nobel Prize winners talking about the setbacks, because I'm sure they've had some. Every person has had some. And I think being able to honestly say that without being impacted, like your grant applications being affected, maybe having that reflection on how did your journey as well would be very positive, and seeing people who've made it talk about it.
People are so reluctant about it, aren't they? I think in these days now, when we're starting to look at narrative CVs, I think I'm interested. We've got a salon session on this in a couple of months' time, and I'm interested in asking that question about what are the risks versus the benefits of including something in your narrative CV about failure. I think that's often a common interview question, though, isn't it? Can you give me an example of a time when an experiment has failed and how you dealt with it?
I think I totally agree with that. Along with being honest, I think what the communities, research community needs more work to be done in this area. So if we can have a forum, just people can talk openly. This is not working, and I think this is a great example. I can say that in coding world, you got open sources for maybe Python. If someone has some problem, they just post the code, and that thousands of people who don't know around the world, they come and talk, oh, I had similar issues, and then the solution comes. So I think we should have a similar kind of approach, maybe so where someone should be able to present about the failure. This is what didn't work, maybe a seminar, and other people can relate how did they cope with that. And another thing I would recommend, maybe the universities or maybe the institutions could develop certain courses around it, how to be resilient. What to expect from the research. Maybe that should be the title of the course. What to expect.
Well, we do. I mean, we do have several blogs and podcasts on resilience. If that's something people are particularly interested in, I'm going to recap on your tips that you've shared in a while. I am keen that we get into the chat because there's quite a few people here, and I'm really interested to hear everybody else's experiences on this as well. The last thing I want to talk about, just very briefly, is about building resilience into studies from the outset. I think if we were looking at this in engineering project management terms, if you're building a bridge, you'd have a risk register of where you've thought in advance of all the things that could go wrong, and then what you do about it and what would trigger you to act upon those things. And I'm not sure in PhD, particularly research. I mean, some of the larger studies, they kind of ask for that, don't they? If you go for a Wellcome grant or a big MRC grant, they kind of ask for these risk plans. But I've done it. It's a tick box exercise on my university's thing. You go through and it says, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And there's just like a yes or a no. And you get to the end. I think if you've never done this, go away and have a look on YouTube. Go Google risk registers. There's tons of examples of templates out there. And I think applying some of that project management methodology into a research study could actually really help. I don't know if either of you use that or have done that yourselves. No.
Not
well, because I mean, the first thing, like the number one risk on your register, I think the way this usually works is kind of study recruitment would definitely be up there if this was a qualitative study. And you've kind of, you're asked to score how likely is this to happen and what would the impact be? And you times one by the other, and then it gives you a likelihood that this risk is going to happen. And then it forces you to kind of think in advance, right, what would I do if that was the case? Okay, well, there are these other sources of recruitment I could go to. There are, I could change and incorporate other people. The things that you ended up doing, Raysa, I guess in your study particularly, or in if the data set turns out to not have what you think would be in it, but it forces you to think in advance of that. So it's when it does happen, it doesn't quite shock you and take you by surprise.
I think that's good to have, to be honest, because then you kind of have a safety net. Because a lot of times in research, you feel like when you fall, you're just falling and there's nothing to slow it down. You can get this positive energy, support from supervisors during your PhD, your fellow PhD researchers, even the team, but at that time you're alone. It is a lonely journey. Research, whatever type of research, no matter what type of lab you're in, it's you and it's on you. If you win or lose, it's yours. But I think it's good to have that kind of risk planning. I like that idea. I will start to include it. And a lot more.
There are templates I could share. We have them in projects all the time. And it's the kind of thing I'm surprised that ethics don't ask for more potentially, actually, as well. When somebody, what are you going to do in advance? If somebody says no to this particular intervention, or what are you going to do if your fallout rate from the study, your retention rate isn't as good as you want it to be? It forces you to think in advance of those things. And so you're not reacting. You've already planned ahead. Listen, this has been brilliant, and we really could talk all day. But I really would like to spend the last 10 minutes in the chat space. So for anybody who's watching, who's new to this, don't go anywhere. Stay where you are. We have had people leave and then go, where do I do the chat? So you stay exactly where you are. We're going to all turn our cameras and microphones off. I'm going to play you some soothing background music and slides while this is going on, and then we're all going to jump into the chat so you can ask our brilliant guests some questions. If you've got questions, you can share your own experiences. Marianne's been brilliant at already doing that. Thank you, Marianne. But please do ask away, share your own tips as well, and we'll look forward to seeing chat. But thank you, incredible Dr. Raysa Zein and Dr. Subhashisa Swain. You were amazing, and I look forward to seeing you again in the salon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.